Okay, so time to go on to some more audio basics. This time we're going to talk about stereo and mono. So what is the difference and why does it matter? Basically, in stereo playback, we have two audio channels to work with. We have left and we have right. We have a left speaker and we have a right speaker. And we can make sound play more out of one side than the other. Take, for example, something that's happening on the right-hand side of the screen, or an aeroplane flyover that might travel from left to right. Stereo lets us make a more immersive experience by giving a bias to certain sounds so that they are more on the right or left side. Mono, on the other hand, is much simpler. It always makes both of the left and right channels identical. It is easier to work with, but lacks that kind of depth and immersive quality we get from having multiple audio channels. Typically, we use mono for dialogue because the dialogue needs to come out of both speakers at the same time and retain maximum clarity and readability. We very rarely, if ever, have dialogue kind of panning from left to right in a film. Most of the other sounds can do that. Dialogue, dead center, very, very clear. Yeah? So how do we know what audio we're working with, and how do we set up our project to make sure that our audio output is correct? Let's take a look at this. So I'm here in this old demo cut timeline again. Resolve manages its basic audio setup through the type of audio tracks we use in our edit and export options that we use later. Now, down on the audio track here it says audio 1. To the right of that we have a little icon here which says 2.0. This means that this current track is stereo. It means that this single audio track can contain two stereo channels of audio, one left channel and one right channel. Because I want my first two or three, in this case, tracks to be mono, because the first three tracks in this edit contain dialogue, I need to change this track. I'm going to do this by right-clicking and then choosing Change Track Type to, and then choosing Mono. Once I do that, it goes from 2.0 to 1.0. The 1.0 means mono, and this audio track is now fine to house dialogue. I can then add new tracks. If I right click over here, I can say add track, mono, stereo, 5.1, 7.1, or adaptive, whatever. We can then add some stereo tracks for when we're doing our track lay, our soundscape, and our sound effects, right? So with that out of the way, let's move on. We're going to be sound editing using the edit panel. As I've said before, we're really not going to look at Fairlight in this course. Fairlight is very deep, it's its own thing. So click on through to the next lecture. Right, so one of the first things that we need to do is to take a look at how we monitor audio and how we can tell how loud any particular sound is in our mix, because we have to make sure that certain sounds are landing at certain points in terms of loudness. So by default, when I play audio back,
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo.
I can obviously hear it, but the actual volume of it might not be as obvious as I'd like. Now, in the far right up here, in the middle of the screen, next to the DIM switch, there are two little grey bars, and these are mini audio meters. By themselves, they're difficult to read and not much use.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo.
I can basically just see green, yellow, and red, and if anything is red, I probably need to investigate. But we need to work in more detail than this. Up here, we have an icon that reads Mixer. I'm going to click this, and this is going to produce the mixer meters and the main meter for my sound mix. Now, there's a lot to these, and we're not going to go super in depth. We're going to keep the way in which we are monitoring our audio quite simple for now. If I play back this dialogue,
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
you can see that these meters fill up with green, yellow, and red, and we have numbers down the left-hand side here. Those numbers are decibels, decibels according to full scale, if we wanted to get technical. Now, they give us a visual representation of how loud my audio is. The higher the peak reaches, the louder the audio is.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
So I can use these meters to make sure that I get my dialogue in the right place. Now, we don't at the moment want to be concerned with the individual track meters down here, and I can click on this border and drag them in and out depending on how many tracks I have. Thing is, I'm going to have about 9 tracks at least on this audio edit, so this is going to rapidly fill up the screen, which I don't want. I just want to keep it simple for now, and I want to monitor the loudness using a single set of meters that I can trust for my entire sound mix. On the right hand side, with the little golden banner up here, we have M1. And this is referred to as our main, or our main mix. This essentially gives us the loudness reading for everything going on in our audio mix, and it's what people listening through stereo speakers or headphones are going to hear. So,
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
and this does look a little loud, but we will go over where we want dialogue to lie in the mix in due time. So I can use this information and I can say,
Let's
maybe
make that flabbiness fabulous.
this is a little bit loud. I can go up here and I can change the volume. We will cover exactly what I'm doing in a lecture later on, don't worry. But now, once I've brought the volume down a little bit,
Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
I can see if I play between the two,
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
that they are more or less similar now. So this is a very basic form of dialogue editing, or dialogue leveling, we could call it. Anyway, we'll go over all of that in much greater detail later on. Now, I don't want to waste all of my real estate on multiple mixer meters that I'm not going to read. So these 3 dots here on the upper right of the mixer panel, I'm going to choose meters. And this just gives me one set of meters, and it's my main one, unless I've set up something very complicated, which we're not going to do in this exercise, or likely any others going forwards. So these meters now give us a reliable reading of the loudness of our mix.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
And you can see that it's more or less the same across the two with that volume adjustment there, apart from when she calls out flabbiness. But we will, in the volume controls lecture, go through exactly what we're doing here. So this is the tool set we use to monitor our audio and try and make sure that everything is in the right place. One thing you might notice if we do go back to the mixers is that the meters on my dialogue track, audio 1, are different from the meters on my main. The main appears to be a little bit lower.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
See how this is red and this is yellow if I go back and play it again.
Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
This is down to something called the panning law, and we are going to cover that in the next lecture. So, this has been a good introduction to the meters. Like I said, all we want to do is click on the mixer icon up here, click on the dots and choose meters, and we will be using these meters to monitor our sound mix as we work through our introductory audio exercise on this project. So, next up is the panning law, and it's quite important. It does influence a number of things that we have to do in the edit. So, click on through to the next lecture once you're ready. In the previous lecture, we noticed that our dialogue track seemed to be a little louder than our main. Now, that can be confusing. It might be a problem. It's not actually incorrect. Let's just take a quick look at what is actually happening here. This is down to something called the panning law. When two identical sounds are stacked up and played out of both channels, they don't double in perceived loudness, they don't double in volume, essentially. The actual increase in loudness is somewhere between 6 to 3 decibels, and that depends on the room in which the sound is being heard. In a perfect room with perfect acoustics, it could be anywhere up to 6. In most kind of mediocre rooms, like the one I'm sitting in right now, which is not built for sound recording, it's probably closer to either 4 or 3 decibels. When working with mono channels, Resolve automatically compensates for this by dropping the loudness by 3 decibels if a mono track is center panned and it's playing out of both speakers equally. And that's the default state for a mono track. It's playing out of both speakers, so in order to compensate for this, Resolve automatically drops the volume or the loudness by 3 decibels. That is why we're seeing slightly lower peaks on the meters for our main compared to the meters on our dialogue track. We'll jump back into the software in a second, but we can see the change Resolve makes if we pan a mono track all the way to the left or all the way to the right, and that means we can make a mono track play out of just the left speaker or just the right speaker. Resolve stops compensating the loudness or the volume, and then we will see that the readings across both meters will be the same. So let's go back into Resolve. Okay, so I'm back in Resolve and we're going to take a look at the panning law in action. So we've already established if I just play this back, it's going to look louder in the meters for the A1 track than it does in the meters for the M1 track.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
And we can see there's a slight discrepancy there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pan this track all the way to the left speaker, and then we will see that actually these peaks do line up almost perfectly. Well, in fact, they do line up perfectly. This square up here is the track panning tool. It allows me to make an entire track, every single audio item in that track, pan from left to right, should I want to do that for whatever reason. We're not going to use these in any real capacity in this exercise. This is simply for demonstration purposes, so don't worry about using this tool here. If I drag the blue dot to the left, now this entire track is going to play out of the left speaker.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
And now you can see that the red peak
Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
lines up perfectly across both sides, because we are no longer having 3 decibels taken away from the loudness of the item because it's only playing out of one side. So this is the panning law in action, and it does have some practical influences on what we do regarding room tone and also crossfading or fading audio between identical samples. But the lecture about looping room tone and using the inspector on audio files covers all of that. So the practical takeaway of all of this, again, is that we just go to meters and we mix using these. This accurately represents what our viewers are going to hear when listening back through stereo speakers or a pair of headphones. So this covers something that does cause a lot of beginner editors to trip up at first. So that's what's going on there with the panning law. So click on through to the next lecture. So in this lecture we're going to take a look at the volume controls in the edit page for Resolve. We're going to do all of our audio edit in the edit page. So let's take a look at what we can do, and we're going to look at volume and the most basic way in which we can level out two bits of dialogue and get them to lie at the right place. So let's take a look at this dialogue here.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
So this is around
Come on, Wayne,
minus 10, minus 13. It's a reasonably good place for that dialogue to be. And this is a bit
let's
loud.
make that flabbiness fabulous.
That's up around minus 6 or so, which is the very top end of where we want that dialogue to be. So I want both of these to be around minus 10. She is raising her voice. She's going to be a little bit louder than the standard minus 12 that we're trying to aim for. So let's take a look at this.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo.
That looks to be about minus 7 or minus 8 to me, so let's raise this volume. Now I can do that in a few ways. I can click on this down here to drag this out. This very thin light line here is the volume for the clip, and as I mouse over it, you can see I go from the standard cursor to two up and down pointing arrows. I can left click and I can drag up or down to raise the volume this way, and this is a very quick way of doing this. Let's say I would just want to see if round about 3 decibels of gain is good, and then I can try it again.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo.
Okay, so that's getting close. Now that I've done this kind of rough adjustment here, I can open up my inspector in the upper right, and I have, if I left click on the icon, if I left click on the audio, I can get clip volume up here, and then I can dial this in to taste with much greater accuracy. So let's say 2.75. And then let's see what effect that has.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that. Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo.
Okay, so that's now staying around minus 10, which for someone raising their voice is more or less what I would like. So that's good. Let's take a look at the next clip and see what we think.
Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
So we've got a few issues here. We have two very loud peaks. So let's just play from here to here, this first bit, and see what we think. Let's deal with the peaks a little bit later.
Let's make that flat. Let's make that. Let's make that flat.
Okay, so that's a little bit loud. So I might actually bring that down. Maybe by about 1 decibel.
Maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
So that's getting quite close. But I still have that peaking issue,
Flabbiness fabulous.
which I need to fix. So let's take a look at how we can add keyframes to volume. Now let's do this the easiest way first. We can of course activate the keyframe, auto keyframe mode up here. Let's go back onto the audio. We can activate auto keyframe back up here by clicking the diamond if we want, but there's an easier, more intuitive way of doing that here. If I zoom right in, I can hold Alt and click, and that will place a keyframe down. I can then move to about here and place another keyframe. Now I can move these up or down, and it will animate the loudness between the two keyframes, just like it animated the zoom in the montage. So we can start quiet and zoom up. That's obviously a useless audio edit, so let's take a look at what we can actually do. I'm going to place another keyframe directly over this high peak, and I'm going to bring that keyframe down. And now let's see what we've got. That's much more level. Okay, that's nicer.
Make that flabbiness fabulous.
And it's obviously staying at the right level here, so
Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
we've got a little bit of a higher peak up here as well. So let's do this. And this is quite a common thing to have to do whilst leveling out your dialogue. And then I'm actually going to make sure the playhead is over this keyframe, and then I'm going to use the clip volume slider up here and bring it down a little bit more. Let's see what we've got now.
Flabbiness fabulous.
And now everything is much more leveled, much more even. We don't get any big loudness spikes, which we do want what we call range in audio, a difference between quiet and loud, but we also want to try and level our audio out and make sure that the two clips sound like they belong together. So let's play these two through and see what we think.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
So I could believe that they're both taken from the same scene. Now these two edit together much more nicely, and a little shortcut here is to just quickly compare the heights of the audio peaks with the next clip. It may be that I might want to raise the volume here a little bit, or I might just want to drop this one to about -3.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo.
Okay, no, that's not correct. Sorry, I might want to drop this one to about 2.25.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
There we go.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
And now those two bits of dialogue feel as though they belong in the same piece. So this is the basics of controlling our volume in the Resolve Edit panel. There's one other thing I want to show you because it can be quite useful for dealing with problematic background noise and room tone, and that's the fader sliders. You may notice that as we click on or hover or mouse over an item, these little white tabs appear in the upper left and upper right corners. These are the fader sliders, and they allow us to make a fade in or a fade out very easily just by clicking them and dragging them. They work both on the image, in which case it will make a fade to black. If I click and drag it to the left, you see it describes a line here, and what will happen is it will fade to black as that happens. And on an audio item, it will fade up and down. So if I wanted to fade this out for whatever reason, I could just drag the little tab up at the top, and then
on, Wayne, maintain the tempo.
It will fade down that way. These can be quite useful for getting rid of little awkward bits of room tone. Let's say I want to fade that bit of room tone out just there.
Maintain the tempo.
And it can add something that's a little bit more natural than just a hard cut to a different room tone, so we can use that to try and disguise cuts between different recordings. We have this little dot down here, and that allows us to make it a non-linear fade. By default it's a straight line and it just fades out at a constant speed. Let me see if I can get hold of it. There we go. But if I drag the dot down, it will make an exponential fade. It will start and fade out very, very quickly, and then it will fade out slower at the end, or I can do a bigger curve where it will fade out very slowly and then very quickly at the end.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo.
If that's what I want to do there for whatever reason. So the fader sliders can be quite useful, and we will get some mileage out of them in this project as well. So this has been a good overview of controlling volume in the edit panel within Resolve. We're slowly getting there now. We have a few other bits of demonstration to cover before we take the first step of our audio edit and we go ahead and level all of our dialogue. So click on through to the next lecture once you're ready. So we've taken a basic look at our volume controls within Resolve. We're going to look at a nice kind of automatic but not really way of leveling multiple dialogue clips together, though, called normalization. And normalization is a good way to approach this, just it's not a magic bullet. You have to go back and you do have to check these things manually and make little tweaks should you find something that is a bit out of whack with the rest of the film. So let's zoom in a little bit, and I'm going to take a look at these two clips. I am going to use normalization to balance the two out. So I'm going to select them both, and then I will right click. And I need to choose Normalize Audio Levels. Now, I get this window here which says Normalize Audio Level, and I can choose from this drop down a few different ways of doing this. we're only going to use either sample peak program or the third option here, which is ITURBS 1770-1. We will use that a little bit later. We're going to stick with sample peak program here, and in most cases I want to use the independent option when I'm doing this because I want all of these clips to be acted upon independently. I don't want them to be compared to each other, not necessarily. So here I have a target level. What this normalization mode does is it takes the highest peak of our dialogue and it tries to set it at that level. So if I now hit normalize, it's going to try and take the loudest sound in these two clips which are only on the timeline, and then it's going to try and set that loudest sound to -10 decibel units according to full scale. And if a character is raising their voice, -10, -8 is a reasonably good place for that sound to fall. So I'm going to hit normalize, and this was already pretty much at -10, so not a great deal has changed. But we can see, if I hit Control Z, that this waveform has become shallower, and I will just make sure that we can see this. If I go back to Edit and Redo, I can Control C. So this is before normalization, and this is with normalization. Because this was peaking around -5, it's now been brought down to about -10. So I can now play these two through and see what I think, see if they're level with each other.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
Now that's okay, but this is thrown off a little bit by the fact that there's a very loud noise here when she starts saying flabbiness, because she really shouts that one out. And that means that that hits my peak, but the rest of this is a little bit quiet. This is okay here, and we need to be careful when we're doing this because the panning law is in effect. If I go back to my mixes, you'll see that it is actually reaching 10.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo.
But on our main, we're 3 decibels quieter, so maybe we go back and we redo this, and maybe instead we aim for -7. So let's step backwards. And
come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
And that's much better. So now I've got exclaimed dialogue resting around -10, which is pretty good. So there's always a little bit of trial and error and waiting and seeing there. So these two more or less match up. What we need to be careful of here is this big peak throwing us off, and what we'd end up doing is going through and bringing this up a little bit, but manually keyframing that down to match, and then listening through to see what we think. So that's the first method of normalizing our volume. Let's take a look at the next one. It's executed in the exact same way. I'm going to right click after selecting them, and I'm going to choose normalize audio levels. But I'm not going to go through sample peak program here. Instead, I'm going to choose this third option, ITURBS 1770-1. This normalizes using a different method. Rather than setting the maximum peak, what it tries to do is it sets our clip so that the average volume is a certain value. And that's what this LKFS thing here means. Now, we're not going to go into LKFS or LUFS measurements in detail for this project. We will take a closer look at that later on. For now, just stick with the numbers here. Don't worry about this notation. For YouTube, a good place to mix our audio is -16 using this setting. So we can put -16 on there and independent, and then hit normalize. And that's going to try and change everything so that the average volume throughout is about 16 decibels. That's what LKFS or LUFS kind of means. There is more to it than that, but that's a good basic introductory way of looking at it. So now we can listen through these two.
Come on, Wayne, maintain the tempo. Let's make that flabbiness fabulous.
Cool. So now these two level out quite well. There's still a little bit of a peak here. However, that is justifiable. She is shouting. So these two audio items now link together quite well. We have to be careful when normalizing using this option, which is the ITU-R BS1770-1. We need to be careful when normalizing with this, because on some quiet and isolated tracks, because it looks at a lot of low-level background noise, it can bring everything up way too high and way too loud as it tries to average out the very quiet background noises with the dialogue. If we have a track that's mostly just background noise and one word, what it will do is it will bring the background noise up, and by extension the dialogue way up, and it will peak out. And we will probably run into that once or twice whilst leveling our dialogue. So we have to pick and choose. We have to mix and match whichever approaches work here. A lot of the time on dialogue intensive stuff, the LKFS or the LUFS method works. The ITUR method does work. For problematic clips, sample peak program is the better way to do it. So this has been a good overview of normalizing our volume. It's one of the techniques we're going to apply as we go through our edit now, and we go ahead and do our dialogue leveling pass. So click on through to the next lecture,